Israel so far has primarily launched a series of airstrikes against different targets in Gaza. Soon, though, experts say the Israeli military could launch a major ground invasion. Anne-Marie, tell us more.
Yeah, so according to Israel's military, the nation has mobilized about 35 battalions. Give you a sense of what that means. Of 35 battalions along Gaza's border, this major show of force, along with Israel's warning Palestinian civilians to leave Gaza, has set the stage for a possible ground invasion. Now, the Gaza Strip, to get a sense of the area, the Gaza Strip is an area about twice the size of Washington, D.C., but 2 million people are living inside it. It's considered one of the most densely populated areas in the world. And since 2007, the area has been under a blockade managed by Israel and Egypt. And that means only a limited amount of people and goods can cross, and only at specific points. Now, Israel has bombed one of those points this week, and the other ones, bombed the one closer to the bottom there, and the other ones are also as well closed. So Israel's most recent ground invasion was in 2014 rather. Their stated goal was to invade so it could destroy a network of tunnels that allowed Hamas militants to enter Israel without going through those checkpoints. Israel didn't go deep into Gaza, but it still encountered intense urban warfare, the most treacherous of which was in a populous neighborhood of Gaza City. That resulted in hundreds of people dying and thousands of homes being destroyed.
All right, so for more on this, let's bring in the Director of International Security Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Seth Jones. Seth, thanks so much for joining us. What do you make of Israel's military response so far? And I want to ask you a follow-up to that. As we await word on those hostages, Israel has said that they will continue to enforce this really intense and horrific blockade on the people of Gaza, many are who are innocents. But is that the proper way to think about this from the Israeli perspective?
Yeah, I think the Israelis face a difficult situation right now where they are involved in the planning of a ground invasion. I don't really think there's any other option than to send in ground forces and for some period of time to occupy parts of, if not all of Gaza. I mean, as we've just heard, it's intensely difficult terrain. I was just in Israel speaking with the IDF on warfare, including urban warfare. And to add on to that, the challenge of dealing with hostages, I just suspect at this point the Israelis are going to have to go in and try to deal with the hostage situation roughly at the same time. I don't think they're going to wait.
So the IDF got a taste of what that would look like 10 years ago, though. Things have changed since then. You mentioned that in this case we have hostages, but there are sort of other things. I don't know if there were drones 10 years ago, maybe there were, but what does a ground offensive look like in Gaza now?
Well, a ground offensive looks like a couple of different things. One is dismounted infantry. So there are going to be dismounted IDF soldiers, not just in the streets, but trying to go house to house through what the Israelis call mouse holing, blowing holes through walls. They will have to move through armored personnel carriers to protect them. They're going to have main battle tanks, bulldozers, to go with them as well. They'll be supported by F-15 and F-16 fixed-wing Israeli aircraft, probably helicopters, and then Israeli drones. But they are facing booby traps, improvised explosive device, suicide bombers, snipers. I mean, it's going to be a tough fight.
So, Seth, let me ask you your take on this siege of Gaza as it stands now, where we've had reports from our correspondents on the ground that for people, again, to understand what this map represents, this Rafah crossing is the only way for people who are in Gaza, and many people have called Gaza the world's largest open-air prison. Mm-hmm. This is the only way for them to get out of the country into Egypt. According to some of the reports that we've seen, that's been impossible. Why wouldn't the Israelis allow innocent people to get out of Gaza? Because they have said to them, you should leave. Yeah. But many people in Gaza say, well, how can we leave if we can't go through this Rafah crossing? Because ultimately, Seth, as you know, I look at the images coming out of Gaza of children and little babies bloodied, and I say to myself, well, that's the next generation of Hamas right there. The recruiting is happening before our very eyes if you don't give people the humanitarian option to get out of harm's way.
Yeah, I think they will have to do that sooner or later. I think they will also have to bring in humanitarian assistance as their forces come in. The challenge that they face, this is just as true in Gaza as it is in the West Bank, is that it's going to be virtually impossible to distinguish between civilians and Hamas and its support network. Hamas generally use civilians as shields. So I think the initial challenge that the Israelis face is an intelligence one. Who is a friend and who is an enemy? And that will be difficult. They will make mistakes. I mean, I think we've seen, based on previous Israeli operations, there are going to be hundreds, if not potentially thousands, of civilians killed and wounded during this operation. But the Israelis will have to, sooner rather than later, begin to pull out some innocents, particularly those internationals that are innocents in there as well, including Americans.
So then what would a successful mission look like? Is it just about getting hostages out, or will it go beyond that?
Well, I think success for the Israeli, the military objective will be to destroy or significantly degrade Hamas as a military and a political organization with as few civilian casualties as possible. But look, the longer term problem here is who do the Israelis give Gaza back to? Not Hamas. And I think the Palestinian Authority has no legitimacy in Gaza, which means I think the likely option for the moment is potential Israeli occupation of Gaza in the future.
So, I mean, again, in your estimation and your analysis, it doesn't sound like a great option. I know they have to do something, and there needs to be an objective that's achieved. But I would think that even in Israel, people would say, man, occupying Gaza is not something that we think is in the benefit long term for the Israeli people.
And it also probably most likely means long-term casualties, maybe not a large group, but it means, perhaps weekly, another report of another Israeli soldier dying. And I can't imagine that Israelis want that either.
Yeah, they also don't want a repeat of what we just saw.
Right.
So, the second option, maybe what a limited withdrawal means, is a much more significant border between Israel and Gaza itself that's potentially mined with concertina wire. But obviously that has implications about the civilian humanitarian environment within Gaza. So really difficult choices.
So last question, Seth, before we let you go, because this is such an intriguing discussion. I mean, there have been instances in history where a force has occupied a country, the United States occupying Germany, West Germany, the United States occupying Japan in the wake of World War II, where everybody in the country was an enemy of the United States. But at the time, Douglas MacArthur, who was, I think, the governor general of Japan, helped to rebuild Japan, helped to rebuild Germany, and then left it to the people who, by that point, had come to realize that a more liberal, westernized view of politics was the path to success.
Yeah, or even more recently, the issue that the U.S. Marine Corps, Army, and others had to deal with in Iraqi cities, including ones like Fallujah. But I think at the end of this, the big challenge is, what is the political next step for Gaza? Is it some kind of Palestinian Authority governance? There are big questions there. But I think at the root of this is we need some decision, probably with the Egyptians, the Jordanians, and Arab states, about what does the governance structure look like in Gaza? Because I think an Israeli occupation in perpetuity is not in anybody's interest, including the Israelis.
No, that's exactly what I was just thinking as Seth was talking. I was like, well, why doesn't Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan come together, much like at Yalta, and decide what is the best course of option? What is the best option? Because if it's just the Israelis, that's problematic.
I think what's sort of interesting is about this conversation is we're actually not including the Palestinians.
Good point.
Which I think might also be, part of the challenge. Seth, you were going to say something.
Yeah, they're critical. I mean, the Palestinian civilian population is critical here. Critical.
Seth G. Jones, thank you so much.
Thank you.